Our featured speaker tonight is Dr. John Dindo. He received his PhD in marine physiology and biochemistry. As a scientist, he has worked with hormones that trigger migration in fish and birds. In addition, he has worked on artificial reefs and on the identification and biology of hard-bottom communities off the coast of Alabama. Dr. Dindo assisted in the creation of the Discovery Hall programs in 1979, and today that department has 5 full-time marine educators. The program teaches hands-on learning to 13,000 K-12 children, focusing on coastal marine experiences, as well as offering teacher training programs. In 1998, Dr. Dindo and Dr. Crozier, Executive Director of the Sealab, raised funds and built a public aquarium featuring Mobile Bay. He has been a member of the National Marine Educators Association for 20 years and has served as a board member and its past president. Most recently, Dr. Dindo was named Outdoor Ambassador from the Gulf Coast region by Governor Riley and was also profiled on the front page of the Mobile Register's Living section. He recently received the Outstanding Alumni Award from the University of Alabama at Birmingham School of Natural Sciences and Mathematics, where he earned his master's and his PhD. Please join me in welcoming Dr. John Dindo, Associate Director of the Institutional Advancement, Dauphin Island Sealab.
You make that up for me? Give me 1 second here for this thing to warm up. This is great. Thank you all for having me here. Side note, since you're going to have an ornithologist speaking next month, in October 15th, the weekend of the 15th, is called Bird Fest. And Bird Fest takes place, it starts in Fairhope, but they go all over this region, and it is the migratory bird season. And they have a website. You can look at Bird Fest if you're actually interested in migratory birds and migratory hawks. There's a large contingent of migratory hawks that take place during that same time. Well, when I was asked to come down and talk, they asked me to talk about seafood safety, and I can tell you about seafood and what our aspects are, but I'm not a food scientist, and I don't want to mislead people in that context. But I thought if you wanted to hear our interpretation of the oil spill, I thought I'd come and talk to you about that. And obviously, we're all aware of it. And unfortunately, you'll see very shortly that it's slowly moving off the front page. And I say unfortunately because you and I live here, and obviously the national media does not. They're just going to move on to the next event. But you and I are going to be saddled with this for a long, long time, and I'll show you what I mean. Obviously, we've all seen these shots, and you know, as we all have to remember that there are 11 families that do not have a loved one as a result of this. And that was the first major calamity that took place, and what followed you'll see. Next time. Well, if we take a look at major oil spills around the world, this spill right here will be classified as the largest oil spill ever to occur in the world. The only one that's larger is the one that took place in Kuwait, and that oil did not go, some of it went into the ocean, but most of it went on land, and that's when Saddam Hussein blew up all the oil wells as he was retreating out of Kuwait. And that oil got dispersed all over the place. But the largest oil spill in the world in water was this one here. And I'll get to some numbers here very shortly. And this is just some of those that I talk about. The one that you hear a lot about as comparisons is obviously the Exxon Valdez that took place in Prince William Sound. And that's not a good comparison. The habitat is totally different. Prince William Sound, and I used to live in Alaska. I lived there for 9 years. I have a bachelor's in fisheries from the University of Alaska. Prince William Sound is a fjord. It's extremely deep. Deep fjord, and it's extremely cold. So the interactions of oil in that habitat reacted totally different than what we have in the Gulf of Mexico. The one that's really relevant to us, and unfortunately good sound data was never collected, that is the Ixnot in 1979. That was right off the Bay of Campeche in Mexico. And note that it was only in 200 feet of water. And some of that oil ended up on the Texas coast, but no one was counting that. You and I were not counting that, I can tell you that, because we were very much involved in something else in 1979, a major hurricane that devastated our community. So oil coming out of Mexico was not a major concern. And so there's not a lot of data to compare what's happening today to what happened then. Oil did end up on the Texas coast. Oil did go into the marshes. We do have some scientists that were there, graduate students at that time. They have first-hand knowledge of what happened, but what volume of the oil ended up there is no one really knows. Well, Dr. Crozier and I use this slide. This is a famous Scottish king who once thought that, and told his minions that he could stop the tides. Well, I have to compare that to BP, United States Coast Guard, and NOAA, because from day one, there has not been a factual representation of what this spill has done. And part of it is that at first they thought there was no oil leaking, then there was oil leaking, then there was a drop. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and I can tell you what I think later. But right now, the best estimates by physicists that look at the spill, they look at the pipe coming out, they can actually, they can break it down into small segments of time and calculate the volume coming out. The best volume right now is 5,000 barrels have entered the Gulf of Mexico. Now, early on in this event, we had people submitting all kinds of aerial photographs. I've seen this, and this was submitted right off the bat. This is over by Point Clear, and the storyline that came out with that from the TV was oil has hit Point Clear. And, you know, we live in a very unique environment. Lots of things happen in this environment, and one is rain. Now, we've had a very dry summer up until most recently, but in the early part of this spill, when the rain strikes, pine forests the water comes out of the pine forest. Pine needles deteriorate into a product known as tannins. Tannins are dark in color. That's why our creeks, even though they may be clear water, they look like tea. And that's a natural event. That's an event of the breakdown of tannins. And so tannins were entering the water through the little creek on your left side over there. And of course the helicopters and everybody filmed it and went to national news. Oil's at Point Clear. You can imagine what Dr. David Bronner thought when this hit the news. Dr. Bronner is the one that's in charge of the retirement systems of Alabama, and he owns the Grand Hotel. This was not a good PR thing for him. Next slide, please. Well, from the first week all the way up until, thank goodness now, Lori's getting very few calls. We're still getting them, but nothing compared to the frenzy that took place right after this started. News teams from all over the world flooded the Dauphin Island. The reason they didn't flood to coastal Louisiana is you can't get there. I mean, the road stop in coastal Louisiana continues. The only way to get to coastal Louisiana is by boat. I mean, right where the coastlines are. So they all arrive on Dauphin Island and they say, where's the oil? Well, this is 2 weeks after, a week after, 2 weeks after. Next slide, please. Well, I did 3 different interviews with a TV crew from France. And after the second one, I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here?